This episode is all about the highly sensitive man, John Hughes. He speaks about feeling the odd one out, about the talents of highly sensitive men. He has a wonderful message for sensitive male youth and also a bit about bullying and so much more. He is from Vancouver, Washington, USA, and he has had a long career so far, 40 years in business and technology. And during that time, he's been a computer programmer, project manager, chief information office, consultant, business coach, executive recruiter, entrepreneur, writer, and author. He spent the first 23 years of those 40 years working for several big companies. And the last 17, he's happily worked for himself as an independent management consultant. Having his own consulting business allows John to work from anywhere. He usually works from his house, but can also work from a cafe or on vacation or even not work at all. So in 2010, John wrote and published his first book, a leadership book called Haunting the CEO. And over the last 2 years, he wrote and published 2 more books, which is Unselling, is a sales sales book for shy and introverted entrepreneurs. And his latest work is a Western novel set in the Wild West days of the United States. John is now looking forward to writing more and working less. Personally, John and his wife Jill live on a small farm in Washington state, along with their lazy cat Ginty. Enjoy this episode. Here is John Hughes. How old were you here?
So I think that one is first grade. So I was probably 6 years old in that picture.
Yeah. Yeah, the emotional intelligence and literacy is so visible here.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. Wonderful.
Yeah.
Those eyes, yeah. And I was curious, what do you have in your pocket?
My mom probably put, since it was picture day at school, my mom probably put a little handkerchief in my pocket.
Yeah.
Yeah, she liked those kind of little details.
Yeah. Do you have that from her? Detail oriented?
On some things I do. But yeah, HSP, we don't miss much. And that's, there's an upside to that, but there's a downside to that as well. We don't miss much, which can be good, but we don't miss much, which means we're continually inundated with, input into our whole nervous system, and it can become overwhelming. But I'm older, so I've learned to kind of manage some of that, and you keep the things that you think may be of value, and you try to let the things go that are just not necessary to retain, I guess.
Yeah. So how would you describe your childhood in just one word, and why?
Oh, one word, my goodness.
Yeah, I know.
If I were to describe my childhood in one word, childhood, I would say, yeah, for the most part, it was fun. My mom is the one that really made it fun. So it was, I would say, fun. Yeah. I mean, it had its challenging moments, of course, but overall fun.
Yeah. That's good to hear. Yeah. So what were you interested in at the time? You look so open with the eyes, open to the world.
Mostly probably sports. I wasn't playing sports at that time, but I still would watch sports and just play with kids in the neighborhood. And I liked learning. So I loved math. And at that time I liked reading, not into novels yet at 6 years old, but, um, or, or college textbooks, but yeah, I was a normal kid, it was small town. I didn't grow up in a big city. So I grew up in a small town in Ohio in the States.
Yeah. Did you already have a cat at the time? Like now?
No, we had a dog for 1 year. And I don't know why we took him back. I was pretty young at that time. So after that, we never had another pet. So no pets in the house. Um, I don't think my dad wanted the noise or the mess, and probably figured he'd be the one cleaning up after it, or my mom actually would be. So no pets.
Yeah, yeah. Wonderful. I read in one of your blogs, which are amazing, by the way.
Thank you.
Um, I'll quote, "We feel a heavy connection to the world and people and events, regardless of who or what or when or where."
Yeah. Um, y- y- I think that probably came out of, um, we watch the news, and that's a thought I had probably a few years ago, but retained it. We watch the news, and when we see things going on around the world, it doesn't matter where it is or how small it might be. I still think we feel, and I'm talking about, with those of us with stronger HSP trait, I think we just feel a connection to that, and they tend to be tragedies, right? So there's a deep sorrow in that, and they kind of hang with you for a while, and sometimes even years, even if you don't know anybody involved. Yeah. And it could be, an accident that happened down the road for me, or it could be something that happened halfway around the world, and it still feels the same.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's,
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, and I like it when, many times, either the newspaper or TV news will come back with the faces and the names of the people, and I like looking through those. As you were looking at my childhood eyes, I like looking at the faces and eyes of people that, unfortunately were lost, but they're still humans. They had souls and spirits, and they meant something to somebody. And I just kind of slowly look over the pictures and the names, and yeah.
Yeah. So, what do you appreciate most um, about highly sensitive men? Or women?
Um, about men specifically, there is definitely a bravery in it and a courage. And I remember after, when we were filming parts of Sensitive the Untold Story, and it was the first time I got to meet Dr. Elaine Aaron, and we did lots of filming that didn't show up in the film itself. And when we were all done, she just said thank you. She said, they some of them went around the world trying to find men who would be willing to do this, and it was hard to find men who would raise their hand and say, hey, this is my trait. And she said that it just takes a lot of courage, and I knew it did. And I'm not saying I'm courageous, but I just want to help others, and I want to, I think I've fared fairly well with this trait, not knowing what the trait was for the first 40 years of my life, but kind of trying to figure out myself. And it gets easier once you understand the trait, right? Because now it has a name, and you can begin to connect with other people, and read about yourself and the trait. Um, so yeah, it definitely gets a bit easier as it goes on. So I appreciate their courage. Um, um, that's probably the top thing that I appreciate. And then there are just more generic things that I appreciate about the trait that aren't specific to men. So I was part of the Dr. Aaron's first HSP men's conference almost exactly a year ago in Santa Cruz, California, and a couple dozen men, most of whom said they had never met another man that had the HSP trait. And I was worried that nobody would talk. I was worried that they, we tend to be introverted, and I figured everyone was just going to sit there. But Dr. Aaron and I barely had to ask a question, and they were engaged with each other. It was so fun to watch. It was almost as if, not quite, but as if they were opening, a present on Christmas morning for those that celebrate Christmas. And it's like excited that, and the present being other men with this trait and being able to share their stories and talk with each other and understand what they're going through and the highs and lows of it. And it was just so fun to be a part of and to watch that unfold. So very, very courageous of all of them. And many of them were filmed in a little video that Will Harper did. And so many more are stepping out, being, as you're seeing, many are stepping out wanting to kind of reach out to those that are younger than us, and give them a thumbs up and say, it's hard at times, especially growing up, but once we kind of really understand our trait and the good and the bad of it, yeah, we are unique, and that's a cool thing. It's a pretty cool thing. But finding our way with that uniqueness and how we fit in the world, it's a little bit challenging, but it's a fun ride.
Yeah. And how did you find that find out that you are a highly sensitive man?
I probably found out in the way most people don't. So I'm just, going along in my career. I worked for a very large global company at the time, and I had a team in Seattle, Washington, and this was all information technology. So a team in Seattle, Washington, a team in Las Vegas, and a team in Orlando, Florida. And I got to fly around and just kind of stay in touch with my team. And one day I was in Orlando meeting with a gentleman who was on my team, and he handed me this book and he said, "Here, this is you." And I looked at the title and I'm like, okay. And I just kind of wanted to get out of that room, right? Because oh, the other thing I'll say about, HSP men is that we don't really like the sensitive word in the title of the trait. And Dr. Aaron, absolutely, she gets that. But once we get over that, we're okay with that. But yeah, he handed me this book and said, "Here, this is you." And I'm like, and I'd worked with him for probably 3 or 4 years, but we never had like deep discussions. So he saw something in me where he recognized the traits, and I guess he himself was as well, but he gave me that book. I still have it today. And that's how I found out was, somebody who worked for me told me this is me. And eventually, I read the book and started following, Dr. Aaron through her emails, or her newsletter, I would say.
Yeah. So how did that change your life, especially your work life?
Well, it didn't, right, at first, because it's it's like, okay, and I get it, and I understand it, but for a guy, and I was we had I had 300 people in IT, in information technology at that time, and I was the number 2 person, right? So I'm this top technology leader for a $1.5 billion company, and that's not what guys do. Guys don't express their sensitivity in corporate America, and this was about exactly 20 years ago. So yeah, you don't do anything except you understand it, and you hide it. It's the same way I grew up, right? It's especially at 5 or 6 or even 10 or 16 or 18, you don't understand it, so you just bury it and you hide it. And that's what I did at the time, just bury it and hide it.
How did you hide it?
You just don't let it out. You have these especially we always focus on the sensitivity side, right? The emotional side, and especially those moments, you have to you stuff back down, and you don't want anyone to see you cry at any moment in time, whether you're 5 years old or 50 years old, as a guy, especially. So that's probably the top way that I hit it was those emotions. So I'm not an expressive person, right? So if I'm really happy, I look like this. If I'm really sad, I look like this. Um, so you just try to have this, monotone emotional aspect of yourself, because that's what we feel, especially guys in America. That's how we feel we're supposed to be. If anything, if we show any emotion, it's anger and a toughness, not sensitivity. So
Yeah. Yeah, especially in your field, it was really courageous to be in the sensitive, the untold story. And I'm curious, what kind of responses did you get afterwards?
um, and it wasn't just afterwards, it's still today. And I
Yeah,
get
probably. Yeah.
through LinkedIn, I get messages from both men and women all over the world, and they're mostly connecting on the HSP plus leadership aspect. And so they just want to connect, or some are wanting, coaching on how do I go do what you do, because what I learned as I went on in my career with large companies, what I learned is that I don't really fit here, right? I want to do something bigger, and I can do things faster and make bigger impact. And I realized the only way I'm going to do that is if I do it by myself. And that gives me I own this thing. I own my business. I own my creativity. I own my brand. I own my services, and nobody can tell me what to do or what not to do. And so many men and women with the HSP trait want that exact same thing. I call it freedom. It's just freedom to work when I want to work and not work when I don't want to work, or freedom to, change my brand or change the services in my company. And I think that I think we like that freedom because we're not understood in corporate America, right? And we're not given the freedom to be ourselves and be creative, and we need our downtime, right? And you don't do downtime in corporate America, right? You work, 8, 9, 10 hours a day, and you work hard, and you go home, and that's what you do. But I like mornings. I have really slow mornings, and I've learned, it's taken me 40 years to get here, but I've learned that I really need these slow mornings to um, just be by myself and think, and I'll read some, I'll write a little bit. Um, so yeah,
Yeah.
I forget your question.
That's totally okay, because um, I always do my research beforehand, and I had one word for you. It was freedom.
Yep.
So, hey.
So do you hear that as a common need of those men and women with the HSP trait?
Yeah, freedom is something that what I notice within my clients, that they really strive for, whether that's within their families, within their work, or um, in expressing themselves also creatively.
Yeah. Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah, but it's really funny that you mentioned freedom, because that was your word that I.
Oh, it was. Oh, just reading about me, you came to
Yeah,
that.
yeah,
Okay.
okay to that word. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. And one of the books I wrote, I talked a lot about that's what I was really after, was the freedom. And really it became a freedom for creativity, and my creativity is writing.
yeah,
And I just long for more time to write. And, I'm able to find it now. Um, Even though I have my own business and, do executive recruiting, I still have time to write even during the day or evenings or weekends. It's hard to carve out enough time, but I have that freedom to be able to do that now.
yeah. Can you tell us a little bit more about your 3 books already?
Yeah. So I never, like in high school, even in college, I don't remember wanting to write a book, but it would have happened sometime, probably in my college days. But I wrote a lot. I wrote up here. I rarely put, and I never told anybody I like to write, because it's kind of like at the HSP thing. If you tell people you like to write, I always thought they would laugh at you and said, especially me, said, you're not a writer, right? That just doesn't compute. So I mean, I'd say for 30 years, I didn't tell people I like to write. And I certainly couldn't say I was a writer, but I wrote a lot. Um, my wife probably laughs at me. I am writing notes all day long. In the middle of the night, I write notes. All day long, I write notes because I don't want to miss. Um, I just don't want to miss anything that I might be able to use in writing.
Do you also
So
have journals all over the house and in the
have
office?
have yeah. Um, so the first book is a business leadership book, and it was like burning inside of me. And for 3 years, I started to write that book, and I couldn't do it. And so I was trying to write it like a typical business book, or maybe like a textbook, right, on leadership, and nothing. I was just getting so mad that I couldn't figure it out how to write this book, because I was afraid somebody else was going to go write it, right? Because I think it's been an important book, and it's was published. I wrote it and published it 10 years ago, and again, I mean, it's not a big seller like on Amazon or Barnes and Noble, but it still sells pretty well, mostly in the U.S., but globally as well. And I was afraid somebody was going to write this book about what it means to be a CIO, Chief Information Officer, and combining that with business leadership. And I was getting so frustrated that after 3 years, I still couldn't write it. And one day I was reading, and I'll share an American author, leadership author, Patrick Lencioni, who's written many, many popular business books. And one he wrote is called The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. And he writes in story format. And so I'm reading Patrick's book, The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, in story format. And I'm halfway through it and I go, I can do this. And I literally sat down and just started writing the book that I wanted to write. It's called Haunting the CEO, and it's written in story format. And it just flowed. The first 4 chapters are almost how I sat down at that moment and started writing. And the rest of the book, it doesn't even feel like I wrote it. It didn't feel difficult. It didn't feel hard. So I found my way of communicating, which is really through my voice. People that know me and read my book say I write the way I talk, very casually, but a lot of dialogue. I love creating. I have lots of conversations in my head with different people. So it's just a matter of translating that onto page. So the business leadership book, Haunting the CEO, was the first one in about 2010. Again, written in story format. The second one, I really didn't want to write, but so I had my own business, independent consulting by myself for about 10 years at that time or something like that. And I was doing really well in Seattle, Washington. I was getting lots of business to do strategic technology consulting and interim CIO work. And work was just coming to me, right? I didn't market myself. I just did a lot of one-on-one networking. And all the time people would ask me, John, how do you get business? These other independent consultants wanted to know how I was getting all this business. And one day in a Starbucks in downtown Seattle, I was networking and I met with 3 different people that day. And all 3 of them asked me, because they wanted to have their own independent business, consulting business. And all 3 of them asked me how I got business in the same day, in the same Starbucks. And I go, oh no, I have to write this book. And so it was a bit of a struggle, but I finally did it. So the second book is called Unselling. And the gist of the book is how, as an introverted, very shy, very introverted individual with all those HSP traits, how I develop business. And it was, I'm not a salesperson. And it was really, I have to be myself. And I think that's HSP people or HSPs. We have to be ourselves. And I think the genuineness of being myself and being generous with, helping people find jobs and referring business to other people and, meeting my clients' needs, that genuineness just everybody wanted to introduce people to me. And that's I mean, there's a little bit more to it, but that's what I talk about in the book, is how I go about doing all that. And it's also, I have a very strong Christian faith, and there's a faith aspect to that book as well. But so unselling, it sounds like an odd word, right?
It's intriguing.
And what's that?
It's intriguing.
It is, and there's. I mean, I'll just give it away, right? So what I found was, as I was being generous, and all of a sudden, all this work came to me, and I got to the point one day where I tried to tell a client, no, I'm not doing any more interim CIO because I want to go right. And they actually talked me into it. So I did one more interim CIO. And then I said, I'm saying no from now on, right? Because I wanted to go right. And what I realized was I was actually, they wanted to hire me and I was telling them no. And I wrote the word unselling. I was unselling myself. Instead of selling myself, I was saying, nope, I was unselling myself because I had something bigger to go do, which was right. Yeah. And actually have the freedom to write. And that's where the word unselling comes from, where I was basically talking myself out of more business because I had something bigger to go do. And I do think that's, I got a message on LinkedIn yesterday from someone with HSP, and they're like, I don't fit in corporate America. I have something bigger to go do. And I just don't know how to get out of that situation and into this other situation. And that's kind of why I wrote that book. It is about business development for shy people, but it's also about how to build up enough business where you can begin to say no to work because you have the freedom now to go do other things.
Yeah.
And then the third book was so fun to write. It's a novel. So I've written a leadership book, a sales book, and a Western novel, which is like.
It was surprising.
It was. I didn't plan to write it. So from a writing perspective, I don't think writers really plan to write what they write. Part of that storyline came to me in a dream, and I have a very rich dream life. And I just decided, what if I kind of play this out more? And that's what I did. It took me about 7 years to write that Western novel. And that's called Let Go the Reins. And it was just so fun to write because I got to make up characters. And so making up characters and giving them personalities, and you got to have the evil guy. So that there's the evil guy who's pretty bad in this book, and writing shooting scenes. And at the core, the story is really centers on a young girl to start, and she grows up later, and her father and a sheriff. So that's kind of the core three characters. There are other characters, but it's their relationship. And the girl despises her father and seeks revenge on her father. So so it's a true Western, but it's a story of redemption. At the end, it's definitely a story of redemption.
Yeah, written by a highly sensitive man.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, one person. I absolutely love this. One person on it has been reviewed that many times on Amazon, but if you go out to Amazon, one person in their comments wrote, "If you read this book, you will feel," and she capitalized FEEL as "you will feel," and I'm like, that's what I was after. I want people to feel, right? Even we're humans, so we have all of these emotions about us, and there's nothing wrong with emotions, right? They're a part of us. And so feeling all these different emotions, all the way from joy and happiness to sadness and betrayal, these are all real human emotions. So I like making people feel that breadth of emotion. I think it's a good thing for people to feel and recognize it. And in the Western, they can recognize different emotions and different characters, and kind of identify with those characters.
And in depth. So that's also one of the many talents of highly sensitive people. Of course, not everyone, but to convert those emotions onto paper.
Yeah, and it doesn't just have to be paper, right? It could be, um, dance or painting or screenwriting. I mean, there's just so many ways. Game, if someone's technical and has the ability to write code for games, they can be creative with gaming. So I think it's just a matter of, um, there's somebody that says that um, vulnerability is like the doorway to creativity. And remember earlier I said, for 20 years, I didn't tell anybody that I wrote. Most of what I wrote was up here, some things I put on the page, but I was embarrassed to tell anybody that I wrote and especially embarrassed to say that I was a writer because I didn't have a book published at that time, which has being an author has nothing to do with being a writer. They seem like they're the same thing, but they're actually two very different things. So that idea of vulnerability leading to creativity is so truthful. The more we, and I think it's the same thing with our HSP trait, the more we are open about it and sharing people about it, the more comfortable we become. Just like I went through with the HSP trait, mostly in my independent business career, but also with my writing. The more I talked about it, I think the more ideas came to me and the more creative we are. So I think vulnerability is, and all vulnerability is just being willing to share with people what's going on the inside of us and taking risks that, hey, I've got this trait and here are the things about it. I know you think I'm crazy, but I'm not. And here's the science behind it. But there's some really good things going on. And this is one message I wish was going on inside families, because I was the odd child in some way and I had to conform to the way a little boy and a teenager was supposed to behave in that house. Um, yeah, so whether you're young or old, that willingness to share what's going on. Oh, I know what I was going to say. That the vulnerability, the change in both home as well as corporate America in companies. I think companies are so missing the opportunity to take advantage of the creativity of individuals who tend to be the quietest in a company, who don't speak up in meetings, who are processing and strategizing, but they want somebody on a one-on-one private conversation to kind of pull that out of them. And that doesn't work. I mean, I've been there. We have to take that step. We have to take the risk. We have to have the courage and be vulnerable with what's going on inside of us. I promise you, the more vulnerable you are with your HSP trait and whatever talent you have, whether it's writing or dance or film or whatever it may be, the more vulnerable you are, the more open you are, the more you tell people about this, it's like freeing, and your creativity will increase significantly.
Yeah. Yeah. Freedom.
But there we go again. There's that word.
So, as an IT veteran, you also wrote, "Become who we are born to be."
Okay.
Yeah.
As an IT veteran, yeah.
I read that. You are described as the IT veteran.
Yeah. I just think, again, strong faith. I think God created us to be a particular way, and so that may have been yeah. I've written so many things. I wrote a LinkedIn article about my Uncle Danny, and that may be where it comes from. I don't remember, but he was my dad's brother, and he was in the Vietnam War, and I so admired him before he went. I was pretty young, even more so after he came back. And he was the guy that crawled into he was very kind of short and thin. So he was able to crawl into foxholes, into enemy holes in the ground to see what might be down there. So risking his life every single time because he doesn't know what he was going to find. So one, very, very brave. But when he came back, he just wasn't himself. And the way I describe it, it's like he's layered in stuff that he didn't ask for, right? He didn't ask to go to Vietnam. He was drafted. And the way he grew up, very, very poor. I mean, literally, my dad's family was dirt poor, 12 kids, and I'm not, and I know they hunted for food a lot of the time. He didn't ask for that. So all these things he didn't ask for, and it took him until his later years in his 60s and 70s that all that was finally gone, and he got to be himself. But he was always created to be who he was in his 60s and 70s. But because of the way his life and what was kind of layered on him, to me it's like tar. This tar is on us, and we didn't put it there. It's think about child abuse, or the trauma that we go through as a child, or being in relationships that are abusive, or all these things that happen to us that we don't ask for. Under all that, there's somebody that God created to be, right? Who he created us to be. And I think part of our lives, we're supposed to be, especially as adults, we own it now. We own all that tar, unfortunately. And it's our job to begin to, take that off and kind of, discover what's under there. I think it's there. It's deep, though. It's very, very deep, and we can't see it. We don't seem to find it, and it's hard to discover it. But I think it's there. We just need to be honest about what it is that's there. And I think it's harder for HSP people, for those with this trait, because it's layered in a trait that's not, I don't think, very well accepted, especially for men. There are aspects of this trait that we're not supposed to behave the way that we naturally would behave with this trait.
Yeah, not yet. We are working on it, all of us.
I appreciate your work on it.
Yeah, thank you. So what would you like to share with partners of a highly sensitive man?
I think we've shared quite a bit. Maybe just go back and kind of fill in kind of some of the spots. So like I said, I was happy as a little boy. I really was. But I didn't have, I love my dad. He taught me everything I know about baseball, and I was a really good baseball player. But we never had a conversation, right? And he always thought I was different, right? And so I think probably the first or second time I cried as a little boy, that was the end of that, right? He did not like that. And that's when you begin to hide that part of yourself. You begin to stuff it down. and again, it's more the sensitive, it's more the emotional side that we stuff down. I was still high processing, right? I was soaking in everything. That's probably one aspect I really didn't understand is, especially as I got older, we're layered with life, right? When we're young, we're not layered too much, but then, married and kids and job and career and all these things. And it took me a while to understand that I need breaks, right? That I need to go be by myself, and all this stuff that I've been deeply processing. I need to do something with it. And for me, it's writing. That's how I get those thoughts out. And I think that's something I didn't realize early on. So it was like the first, 30 plus years of my life, everything was just stuffed down. And so the emotions are stuffed down. You don't behave that way. All that processing going on. I mean, I got some of it out in writing, but some of it still stayed down. And my sister used to tell me, she's a year older than I am. My sister used to tell me that, you need to go to counseling. I would get mad at her. She goes, John, you have anger problems. And you have to know my sister. She was actually trying to be nice, but the way it comes across is not so nice. But later, a few years ago, we finally had a conversation where we were both able to really listen to each other. And she explained what she meant by that. And once she explained it, I understood. And so this anger that so many young men and men have, on the one hand, anger is a very real emotion. I mean, there's really nothing wrong with being angry except where it comes from, right? And what we do with it. Um, and I just think overwhelming majority of the time, anger in men is just them stuff, because it's what I did. We just stuff down, the emotions especially. And you can only fit so much emotional deep down before it explodes. And we all have our different triggers about what
Yeah.
what explodes us. And typically it's rejection. Some form of rejection, we explode. Um, so a pretty good childhood, but I wasn't allowed to be myself growing up. And I think one thing that I would say is, um, to young men with this trait, you got to understand who you are and really understand the trait and how it manifests itself, how it feels inside of you, and how it comes out. And I think the other thing that I learned way too late, maybe when I was 50, is that emotions are a good thing. And the Western I wrote was really intended to express that holding in emotions is a bad thing, but expressing those emotions and naming them. When I finally went to counseling about when I was 50, because my sister kept pushing me, um, the counselor, she was wonderful, just absolutely a healer. And she said, so what are you feeling now? And I would say, I don't know, I feel. She goes, no, what are you feeling? I could not name a feeling. I couldn't say whether I was happy or sad or however I was. I couldn't do it because I never learned to do it. And I also learned, I pretty much learned that it wasn't good to name those feelings. And so especially when we have this HSP trait, um, we get people looking at us like there's something. I've experienced it my whole life. There's something wrong with you, right? They either say it or they give you that look, and we have to respond somehow to that. And especially those of us that are introverts bury that deep inside, right? And those we learn not to express those emotions. I do remember this story. It still kind of it still upsets me because it was an adult male that behaved this way. So I was also a wrestler in high school, and I think I was probably sophomore year, 16 years old, and we were at an away at a different town wrestling, and we're all getting back on the bus, and we're trying to get back on the bus, and I realized I didn't have a shoe. I only had one shoe, and I started to cry. I'm 16 years old in a wrestling locker room with all tough guys and a couple coaches, crying because I lost my shoe. And I walked out to the bus with, I don't know, I might have put my wrestling shoes on, or I might have just gone barefoot with one foot. And my one of the coaches just goes, wah, 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 John lost his shoe. I was devastated because he did that in front of the rest of the wrestling team. And what he didn't know, what was going through my mind was, we didn't have much money, and I didn't want to have to go home and tell my mom and dad they needed to buy me a new pair of shoes. That's what was going through me is, I mean, it's not a big deal, but we did not have much money. And for him to respond that way was, still, I'm feeling it today, even the way he responded. So, we those you young men that have this trait about you, you're going to experience a lot of situations like that. The key is it's hard, but you've got to learn to say, even to yourself or to a friend, you know what, that made me mad. I didn't think, or even to that coach, but I didn't have the skills, the communication skills to be able to do that. But just to say, you know what, that made me mad. And it really hurt me that you said that. Just saying that is freeing, but that's not what I did or what we tend to do. We stuff it down on top of everything else that we've stuffed down.
Yeah.
Trying to think of, but yeah, it's a combination of, you're going to experience some really difficult, embarrassing situations that are truly going to hurt you, but you really have to understand how you respond to that, right? And the best way to respond is just to hear it, and then if you can say, that really hurt me and upset me or made me mad. But at least if you don't say it to that person or say it to somebody else, at least say it out loud, right? Just say it out loud to get that out. Just don't keep stuffing those things down. And then the other side of that is, I went through a lot of those experiences growing up, even into my 40s. But once you start to say, this is who I am, and there's some really cool aspects. So I'll give you one that I don't know where it fits in the does, but that I can just look at people and know something about them, right? That kind of intuition that you would know better than I do what piece of our high sensitivity that is, but I can know something about people just by looking at them. And what we do as executive coaches is we find really talented leaders, like business leaders and technology leaders. And I can be talking to somebody on the phone and know within 5 minutes whether they're a strong leader or not. And so that helps us in our executive searching to find really strong leaders. And I'm not even so much looking for things. It's just, I really do feel the conversation, and I feel how they're talking, and I can know if they're lying, and I can know all these things. So that's just one example of how cool this trait can be. And it's a matter of, it's not a negative all the way around. There's some really positive aspects about this trait. So finding what it is that you want to do and how your genuine self and this trait all kind of fit together. Don't wait like I did until you're 50. I knew about this trait at 40, but really didn't start to take advantage of it until later 40s, and maybe even 50 or so. And I'm closer to 60 now. So
that's a wonderfully insightful message, John, for us male youth. Thank you so much.
The difference here is if I can help them over those tough times and hurdles with some encouragement, and man, don't get down. Look, you've got to look at the positive side, or you got to have, people around you that understand you and understand your trait. That's really what this is all about, is, especially for the younger generation. There's some bad things about this. I wouldn't say bad. There's some difficult times you'll go through, but it's worth it. It's absolutely worth it. And just stay focused on, who you are and what it is that you want to accomplish in your life. And don't let others get you down. So it's more the cheerleader, if you will, the coach and the cheerleader coming alongside and just encouraging people positively. That's why I responded to this.
Yeah. Thank you very much for your valuable participation.
I always enjoy chatting with you. So I enjoyed this as well. Thank you very much. Got it.
Thank you.
I am a highly sensitive man.